Forward ever. Forward ever. Good morning. Yesterday was a wonderful day, wasn't it? You know, God has appointed the times and the seasons for the nations. He has also set the boundaries for the nations. And when I was reflecting yesterday on the season that we are in, it dawned on me that we are in the 60th year since the founding of the Organization for African Unity, now the African Union. We have another 10 years to go to get to the 70th year. And 70th year is always the year to escape from captivity and be ushered into freedom. And so for the next 10 years, the reason why God is calling us at this time together to look at national development and in the context of Africa's development is that the next 10 years will be the years of breaking the chains that are holding us back. And so that should be our focus. Coming out of the captivities that we are being drawn behind by, and then being able to enter into a new era, the new Ghana, the new Africa. One of our desired outcomes for this time is that we will have a moral vision for our country. All stakeholders will be engaged, but there will be a moral vision for the country, and there will be moral values that have been intentionally and prayerfully selected that will inform the moral vision. This will be known to all Ghanaians, and we will work to embed these values in every sphere of society. And that will bring us together and give us an incredible momentum to march towards the vision for our developed nation. Yesterday we looked at some of the values that we are going to be engaging with, and we looked at God dependence, and then we also looked at positive African identity, and this morning we'll be looking at integrity, freedom and justice, interdependence, maximization and excellence, but my emphasis will be on integrity and maximization because we cannot address all of them equally with the time that we have at hand. So let's look at the subject of integrity. What is integrity? A person of integrity is a person whose private life is consistent with the projected public life. Now, when I go into different countries or cities, there are very simple tests for the level of integrity in a country. One of the quick ones is to try to rent a car. If you rented a car and it requires a driver, it shows you the level of integrity is a bit lower. If you can rent a car without a driver, then the level of integrity is a bit higher. If you rent a car with a driver and the owner of the car or the managers of the company keep calling the driver, then the level of integrity is much, much lower, right? And so that's a very quick test. Another one is looking at the walls of the houses, the walls that they build around the houses. Now, when the walls around the houses look like the walls in the prisons, the level of integrity is low. And you will see that the walls are very, very high, and you have electric wires on top, you have spikes on them. That is self-imprisonment. In other words, you've used the architecture for walls, for prisoners, for yourself at home. It's an indication of the level of integrity. Then you also look at relationships. When you look at what is happening with marriages and families, the more negatives that are happening, the lower the integrity. And so there are very quick ways of finding where we are in terms of integrity. But the reality about integrity is that if you have a nation that is low in integrity, you cannot develop. Seeking to develop a nation that is low in integrity is like trying to fill a huge barrel with water, and the barrel has a lot of holes in it. The more you fill it with water, the more leakage that occurs. And so you can never have a full barrel. And so you have to plug all these holes and ensure that integrity is at a higher level before you can think of development. When integrity gets to the point where it is systemic, in the sense that every rank and file is engaged in corruption, then you know you are really in trouble, because you cannot uproot corruption easily when it becomes systemic. And you know corruption has reached the level where it is systemic when those who are supposed to fight corruption are themselves practitioners of corruption. And so you need something more than ordinary governance. This is the reason why the church needs to partner with government to ensure that our development is on track. Now, there is something that we need to look at as Ghanaians, and I call it Ananseism and morality. Ananseism and morality. You know, we have our Ananse stories. And the Ananse stories help us understand human shrewdness, smartness, and craftiness. Now, when we tell the stories, we don't set the context right. And so those who listen to the stories may mistakenly think that we are supposed to emulate the shrewdness of Ananse. The result will be you have a nation filled with a lot of Ananses. And a nation that is filled with a lot of Ananses cannot develop. And so as we continue sharing Ananse stories, let's set the context right. Let's help people understand that these stories help us understand natural human tendencies. But they should call us to integrity rather than calling us to become Ananses. So the context has to be set right. Now, let us look at freedom and justice. Freedom is never freedom when it is granted by one to another. True freedom is freedom that is taken by a people who are ready. Now, a lot of times we attend conferences, we make noise as Ghanaians, as Africans, asking others to create conditions for us to be able to have equal opportunities, equal rights. It doesn't work that way. When you reach the place where your conscience tells you you need freedom, what you do is to fight for it and take it. Because when you take freedom by yourself, you are free. When it's granted to you by another, the one who grants it can take it back. We look at justice. When we look at the subject of justice, we know that we have justice if it is readily available to the weak and the disadvantaged in society. When justice is not available to those who are weak, to those who are voiceless, to those who are faceless, then you don't have true justice. I believe that Ghanaians, Africans in particular, as we have experienced so much injustice in the world, we should become champions in advocating for justice for all other people. Our experiences should help us to be empathetic and sensitive to situations of injustice. And we should be freedom fighters. We should be advocates for justice. We should not continue just telling our stories. We should not continue just self-pitying in the past. We should now move to the space occupied by victors. Because we have the victory, let's take our freedom and let's fight for freedom for other people. Let's look at the subject or the value of interdependence. I mentioned yesterday that Dr. Kwejiri Agre gives us a very simple illustration of that important value. You need the white keys and the black keys on the piano to make rich music. And as a nation, we have always embraced this value by telling the world we are neither for the East nor for the West unconditionally. We are for all humanity. And in situations, we take our position based on our values. I believe that as we move forward, we should work with the value of interdependence because no one country can develop alone as an island. We need one another to move forward together. So that is about interdependence. But let's come to maximization. And when we are looking at maximization, we are looking at development that comes through the adding of values to existing resources. We have been blessed incredibly as a continent. We have been blessed incredibly as a country. Can you imagine that this country of Ghana, since the 15th century, has been exporting gold to the rest of the world, and we still have gold all over the place? Now, when we look at the resources that we have to remember that they were given to us by God, and God expects us to be good stewards of the resources that He has given to us. When we look at Matthew chapter 25, verse 15, and we are looking at the parable of the talents, it is stated very clearly that the master gave to each according to their ability. The master gave to each according to their ability. God gave us a lot of resources because He has also given us the ability to be good stewards of those resources. The abilities may be hidden, latent. They may be in the potential realm instead of the realized or actualized realm because of all the historical experiences we have had. But we have to keep in mind that God expects us to be good stewards of the resources. God believes that Ghana and Africa can be good stewards of the resources He has given to us. He gave according to His perceived ability that He has put in us. So don't let anyone tell you we don't deserve what we have. It is God who set the boundaries. It is God who gave the resources. When we start from this side, then we have to ask ourselves, why then have we not done much better? And in very, very simple terms, the reason why we haven't done much better is because our economy is based on exporting huge logs of timber and importing toothpicks. I'll repeat. The reason why we haven't done much better in our development is because our economies are based on the exporting of huge logs of timber and the importing of toothpicks. It's a metaphoric statement, but it's a very, very true statement and an apt description of why we are where we are. We dig gold and diamond, we exploit oil only to buy sugar and rice. If you are digging gold to buy rice, you cannot develop. Now, when you come to the Lord's Prayer, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It has to do with the relational aspect, God and ourselves. And generally, may his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But the first specific prayer request is, give us today our daily bread. Give us today our daily bread. That is the first specific prayer request in the Lord's Prayer. Why is that? It is because everyone who names the name of the Lord must have the basics of life so that that person carries basic human dignity. And when we are looking at daily bread, there are three areas that we have to look at. First of all, existence. We have to exist. But secondly, creativity. Creativity, because humans have been created in the image of God, we have to have the freedom to exercise creativity. That is part of our daily bread. And then the third one is development. You have to grow. If you are alive and you are a healthy organism, you have to grow. If you are not growing, you don't have the dignity. So give us today our daily bread. And I will say, if you win the battle on the space of daily bread, you can develop. And I will say categorically that we are losing the battle in the space of daily bread, and I will explain to you what I mean. Let's come to the literal application of that because it is appropriate. Bread. Let's go into the politics of bread. And now I'll speak as an ever Ghanaian. Before the Portuguese came, we had abolo, and we had abolo in different forms. Abolo steamed, abolo baked, and we'll have our abolo with amadechi or any other stew. And we started our day. If you didn't want abolo, you could have akata, in liquid form. You started your day. Now, when the Portuguese came, then they introduced bread. Pano. Pano is a Portuguese word. It's not fancy. It's Portuguese. And we decided, Yavu bolo. This is the white man's abolo. Yavu bolo. And with education, we all felt like if you are having breakfast as someone who has gone to school and you are employed properly, it should be Yavu bolo, not abolo. Right? I remember we were in the village in Tazavu, we were with our grandmother, and one morning she served us breakfast. It was tea and yakayake. All right? When she served tea in Yakaeke, we were 3 boys. When she served tea in Yakaeke, we rebelled. We said, no, we are in Tazawu, but we came from the city. And we know tea goes with bread. So we refused. We were not going to have Yakaeke for breakfast. Our minds have been influenced, right? So we went for Yevubolo. Here is the problem. Your abolo is based on corn that you have. Yevubolo is based on wheat that you don't have. Here is the problem. So we cross over to Togo, still dealing with the Ewe people. In Togo, it was the French. So what they said was, ours is not ordinary bread. It's good bread, bon pain. Bon pain, the long one. You know what I'm talking about, yes. So the Ewes on the other side went for bon pain, and the Ewes on the English side went for Yevubolo. We all lost ground. Please understand how God works. When God says, pray to me, give me my daily bread, when you pray, give us today our daily bread, God will ask you, what do you have in your hand? What do you have on your land that I gave to you? Not what does someone else have. It is always the first response. God always, before he performs a miracle, he will ask you, what do you have? And when you say, like Moses did, all I have is this rod, God will say, that is enough. Let's work with it. Now, when God asks us as Ghanaians, what do you have? We have corn, we have cassava, we have millet, we have beans, and you can go on and on. What God will say is, that is more than enough. So then why do you base your daily bread on wheat, which you don't have? To develop, we have to work with the slogan, eat what you grow, and grow what you eat. What you are already growing, that's what you should eat. If you have to grow it because you insist you want to eat it, then you have to grow it. If Ghanaians insist that they want Yevubolo, then you have to grow wheat. Until you grow wheat, when you are living on Yevubolo, you are, every time you eat, you are creating deficits. So that is another illustration of where we are. Now, let's come to Sankofa, the principle of Sankofa. I believe that our ancestors were smarter than we are today. All right? Our ancestors were what? Smarter than we are today. And let me explain that also to you. Let's come to wache, right? Wache, when they are making the wache, they will take the rice, and then they use sorghum leaves, dried, and it colors it nicely and flavors it nicely. That sorghum leaf they are using is a powerful medicinal plant. It boosts your immunity incredibly. And then the wache itself is wrapped in another leaf, which is different. That leaf, tomato, coccus, Danieli, I learned the word, so you know I did research before I'm saying these things. Tomato, coccus, Danieli, that leaf has a lot of oxidants. It can help fight cancer, And banana leaves also can help fight Parkinson's disease. And then they have antibacterial capacities within them. So when you put the food in those leaves, for 24 hours, they are preserved. If the food item itself had bacteria, the leaves help fight the bacteria. Are you listening? So our ancestors, they could not write these things down, but they handed them over to us. Now, we have put the leaves aside, and we are using plastic. The opposite is this. When you use plastic for your banku, plastics are carcinogenic. They actually cause cancer or increase the risk of cancer, as opposed to the leaf helping you fight cancer. And anytime you use the plastic and you are rolling the banku, right? You know, we like to do that. You are giving money to China because they make the plastic. So the more you do that, you are impoverishing yourself and resourcing China. And you are reducing your health. When our forefathers were taken as slaves to the Caribbean countries, they asked to be given cola, right? They asked them to bring cola nuts over there. And the cola nuts, they needed the cola nuts for stamina to work. But the cola nuts, they are miracle nuts. They are also very high in antioxidants. And they help dilate the blood vessels so that, you have good blood circulation. They also give you a positive mood for the day. Now, the cola nuts was discovered by the US, and so came Coca-Cola. All right? The original Coca-Cola was based on cola nuts from West Africa. There's no question about it. This is the problem we have. Instead of making your beverage from cola, which you have in abundance, we want to drink tea, and you don't grow tea. Are you getting my point? So let me just put it simply. If you don't change and use what God has given to you for your daily bread, you are joking that you want to develop. You see, God does not support irresponsibility. He does not support irresponsibility. So let us remember, give us today our daily bread. The answer that comes to that prayer is a question. What do you have? And when you tell God what you have, He will tell you, mine. That is more than enough. I did an experiment 3 weeks ago because I thought that bean powder, because it's protein, is safer to eat in larger quantities than corn and rice. So I said there should be a way for us to make tuwo with bean powder. It doesn't always have to be rice. So I got my wife's permission to go to the kitchen. So I went and I got my bean powder. I came 70% bean powder and 30% rice powder. And I came out with a tuwo, and it was fantastic. Then she got converted, and she also used bean powder and some corn powder and made akplen, which also had a lot of bean powder. So if you are struggling with diabetes, go back to beans. Our ancestors were wiser than we are. When we had our migrations, we depended on cassava. and we call it Agbeli. Agbeli, there is life. Last month, I think there were some 4 boys or 4 young ones as a result of a plane crash in the Amazon somewhere. Everybody thought they would have died. After 4 weeks, they were discovered, and they had lived on cassava for the 4 weeks, Agbeli. Let's go back to what our ancestors had for us. Finally, excellence. Excellence. Only the best is good enough for Africa. You know, there are standards of development. When people are constructing roads, there are roads for the developed world, then there are roads for the developing world, and then there are roads for Africa. And within the African context, there are roads for Ghana. Ghanaians like open gutter, right? Something has told us that open gutter is a necessary thing, and so we can't graduate beyond that. So they give us what we ask for. But that is old technology everywhere else in the world. Everywhere else in the world. What we have to do as Africans, as Ghanaians, is when we get to the global table, we tell them we want what the first world has, because only the best is good enough for us. God bless you.